Hello again and welcome back to the second part of Principles and Procedures of Materials Development. As I mentioned, the focus of this session 5 or the second part, is on second language acquisition research and materials development. The research in second language acquisition tells us something about the materials. For example, here we have two quotations from two researchers. It seems clear that researchers cannot at present agree upon a single view of the learning process, which can safely be applied wholesale to language teaching. It means that nowadays our understanding of learning or language learning is not complete. There are different views, there are different approaches, there are different theories, that there is no one single theory. It means that when you are evaluating materials, you should resort to all useful modern theories and use the information of those theories, or your decisions, your practice, your understanding should be informed by those theories. No second language acquisition research can provide a definitive answer to the real problem of second language teaching at this point. There is no predetermined correct theory of language teaching originating from second language acquisition research. What does it mean? It means that relying on second language research, you cannot decide about language teaching and learning, or you cannot decide. You cannot simply rely to second language acquisition research. You should rely on other areas of research, such as conversation analysis, discourse analysis, sociology, psychology, and general education research. It means that here we are only considering second language acquisition research, but when it comes to teaching and learning, our findings about second language acquisition is not sufficient, because there are some other things that are important. You should consider the findings of other research areas. It means that when we say second language acquisition research, we should only focus on language acquisition, but learning and development is not language acquisition. Or when we are talking about education, we should not be limited to language acquisition, because the purpose is not language acquisition. The purpose is constructing knowledge. The purpose is developing, acquiring, and assuming identities. So the research findings should be used from other areas: general education research, discourse analysis, needs analysis, and things like that. But now, what second language acquisition research tells us? So the findings are interesting and they can help, but they are not sufficient. Unha are necessary and essential, but they are not sufficient. Okay, here there are 6 actually principles. One of them says that the second language acquisition shows that language learning requires rich, meaningful, and comprehensible input of language in use, not language in use. Language in use, real language, authentic language. So exposure is essential. Exposure to what? To input, to materials, to rich in language, not simplified language. Language which are actually input which is meaningful and comprehensible. It should be comprehensible, it should be meaningful, it should be rich, not simplified, not distorted. Okay, the other one is that The materials are rich, meaningful, and comprehensible, which are engaging students affectively and cognitively, emotionally and cognitively. So cognitive involvement is not enough. The materials should encourage learners to think about the problems. But thinking is not enough. To have emotion, to have feeling about the problems, the topics, the issues. The other one is that, the other principle is that, or SLA research shows us that language learners achieve positive effects. Materials should help learners achieve positive effect. Positive effect means حس خوبی باید داشته باشن. حس و حال خوبی بهشون بده. Okay, when students are in quandary, students are under pressure, students do not like it, حس خوبی در موردش ندارن, so they do not learn. Number 4, L2 language learners can benefit from using those material resources which they typically utilize when acquiring and using their L1. Okay, so this refers to the materials that they used to use in their L1. The materials which are authentic, the materials which are natural. The other one is that we should not directly teach our students, but we should provide them, for example, the space or opportunity for discovering. Okay, students should be given the space for discovery. Our purpose is not to deliver materials. Okay, as rules, give them, present them, provide them the materials. Okay, these are grammatical rules, these are vocabulary items. They should discover about language, not directly taught or directly told about language. And the most important thing is that a student should be given the opportunity to use language. Learning is not enough. The purpose is to use language. If you provide them with the opportunity to learn language, but without the opportunity to use language, so in the future, when it comes to using language, they cannot use it because you have not provided them to put in use whatever they have learned. So materials should be rich, meaningful, comprehensible. These materials engage students effectively and cognitively. These materials help learners achieve positive effect, means حس خوبی داشته باشن. They number 4 is a human being has many mental resources, for example, imagination, even analysis, synthesizing. They are holistic. They have holistic view. They have analytic view. And many things like that. Okay, all resources should be used. Imagination, literature, I don't know, kinesthetic, different senses, visualizing, seeing, hearing, all the resources or mental abilities should be used if you want to help learners learn better. Then you should provide them with the opportunity to discover about language. And finally, learning is not sufficient. You should provide them with the opportunity to use language. Because when you do not give them the opportunity to use language, they only learn them, but in the future, when it comes to using language, they cannot learn. And in order to achieve impact or to be influential, materials should have some properties, some characteristics. Materials should have novelty, they should be original, they should be different. Activities should be real life activities. Activities should not be familiar, it means that repeated material, it's a novelty. In real life situation, we have novelty of activities, novelty of actually situations. The other one is variety. Variety means that we should have tanavu. Sometimes, for example, in the textbook, you see that the textbooks, the chapters or unit are the same, they are similar, and like assembly line خط تولید هستن که اتاق هست مشخصه، تو این اتاق اینه، تو اون اتاق اون یکیه، تو اون بخش اون یکیه. کتابایی که اینجوری نوشته شدن تکراری هستن، اول نمیدونم وکابه، بعد ریدینگ، بعد یه دیالوگ، همینجوری پشت سر هم یونیت ها شبیه هم هستن. این میشه assembly line. Attractive presentation should be attractive, using of photos, images, spaces, blank spaces, or things like that. Appealing content should be attractive, interesting, and achievable challenges. You should provide the students with challenges, but not complex challenges. Challenges should be achievable. Again, let's see. Materials should help learners to feel at ease. Feel at ease. They should feel comfortable. They should think that what they are doing is possible to do. It is achievable. They sometimes say that stress and pressure is facilitative. Stress and pressure helps. For example, especially about Iranian, we say that زور باید بالا سرمون باشه که یاد بگیریم. But تا چه حد زور؟ Okay, this زور or pressure should be feasible. This should be reasonable. Should be acceptable. The students should feel at ease. They should feel that they do something. They can succeed in doing something. Number 3, materials should help learners develop confidence. Yes, they should develop confidence. They should be relaxed. They should feel that they are able to do, or if they are actually doing, it is of great use to them. Relaxed and self-confident learners learn faster. So, for example, when you have a negative view or negative look to your students, that you are lazy, you are not smart, so students do not develop confidence. They feel that they are lazy, they are smart, they are not smart, and they have problems, they have actually intrinsic problems. So then they cannot learn. So the materials, or as a teacher using materials, you should help learners develop confidence. Number 4, what is being taught should be perceived by learners as relevant and useful. Unfortunately, in textbooks, sometimes the topics or text or exercises are included. Then the students think that these things are not relevant to their lives. It means that the students think that these materials are there only for practice. In the future course of action, they never encounter these exercises or their problems. So they think that these things are only for learning, not for use. So here, what happens? There will be a mismatch between learning and also using. So when we deliver something or present materials or teach materials to our students, they should be sure about the usefulness, the relevance of the materials. They should think that what now I am learning is exactly what I need in the future. What now I am learning is what in the future I will use to solve my problems, real life problems. So they should feel that materials are relevant and useful. Materials should require and facilitate learners' self-investment. Self-investment means that students should invest themselves in the activity of learning. They should invest their attention, they should invest their motivation, they should invest their efforts. Here it would seem that learners profit most if they invest their interest, they are motivated, their effort, they are hardworking, and attention, they are attentive in learning activity. Okay, so the material should be interesting enough to help learners invest in the learning activities, put or use their efforts, their energy, their enthusiasm, and whatever needed for learning. The other principle is that learners must be ready to acquire the points being taught. This refers to the fact that second language acquisition research shows us that when students are not ready to use language, asking them to use language so is not useful, effective. So we should allow students to get ready. First, we may start with comprehension. First, we may start with one aspect of learning. It's not possible to ask students simultaneously. Okay, we may simultaneously work on them, but when it comes to use, it's not possible to force them to remember the pronunciation, the meaning. So it may be delayed after, for example, 6 times of experience. After 1 time of experience, or after experiencing once, they should not be expected to use it appropriately. But using it, the structure should be delayed after 10 times of experience. That's why that the research says that a student must be ready to acquire the points being taught. Okay, so we should not bombard the students, and by bombarding a student, expecting them to learn all the things that we have offered and provided. That's why, again, by Krashen we have I+1, and you are familiar with this idea. The other number 7, or the seventh finding by SLA researchers, materials should expose the learners to language in authentic use. I have always talked about authentic use. For example, especially for oral language skills, listening and speaking, we should necessarily use authentic materials. In Iranian textbooks, in the future, we will evaluate the materials. You see some dialogues and conversation in the textbooks. But what is wrong with the conversation? At first glance, you may think that, okay, there is a good provision of oral language or activities in the material in the textbooks. But the problem is that those dialogues and conversations are not authentic. What happens when the conversation and authentics are not, the conversation and dialogues are not authentic? So when they are not authentic, they are distorted. Distorted means that they change the structure of language and they make the language non-natural, abnormal, unacceptable. Then what happens? What happens is this: what the students learn is not what they need to use in future. So they are only wasting their time. That's why for Iranian language learners, after four or five learners learning, they are not even able to introduce themselves. They have learned many dialects and greetings, but why they cannot greet in English? That's because whatever they have learned is non-authentic, but when it comes to use language, they should use authentic language. In the future, in one session, I try to elaborate on authenticity and also authentic language use. The other actually finding coming from SLA research is the learner's attention should be drawn to linguistic features of the input. It means that we say that procedural knowledge, we say that implicit knowledge is okay, implicit learning is good, peripheral learning is good, but sometimes the primary activity is communicative. The primary activity is meaning oriented and meaning based. But it doesn't mean that we should not draw our students' attention to some of the structures. Okay, we should not directly teach our students about language. We should focus on communication, on meaning. But after that, it is possible and it is okay to draw their attention to some of the features, some of the forms. For example, this is called noticing, means that they read this text, but we say, that, okay, pay attention, the preposition or the infinite article is this, or for example, the form of the punctuation is this. Okay, this kind of activity is called, this kind of activity is called what? Noticing, drawing a student attention to language, to form of language. An output hypothesis, okay, you studied comprehensible output hypothesis. Through interaction, through modification, we helped learners to notice grammatical structures they are producing, syntactical structure they are producing. And after a while, they learn how to modify their language or the language they are used. Number 9, materials should provide the learners with opportunity to use the target language. Okay, so again, the research shows that without the chance to use language they have learned, they do not develop communicative abilities. For example, in the output hypothesis by Merrill Swain, it was shown that the students who study, for example, mathematics or geography, all of the courses in English, only study. They learn how to read it. But when it comes to speaking English, they cannot speak. So it means that to use language, if they want to speak, they should use language for the purpose of speaking. Or you should provide them with the opportunity to have output, to use language in their production, in their productive activities, if you want them to use. Or if you want to help them use language in comprehension, again, you should provide them opportunities for comprehension activities. So only learning is not enough. Opportunities with use is much more important than learning. If you want to develop students' comprehension abilities, you should provide them opportunity to use language in their comprehension. If you want to want them to develop productive abilities, you should give them the opportunity to use language in speaking and in writing. The other one is materials should take into account that the positive effects of instruction are usually delayed. This one again refers to the fact that language learning is gradual. Language learning is gradual rather than instantaneous process. So gradual nature of learning should be taken into account. You should be realistic about your expectation of the students. Language learning, specifically language learning, is gradual. The other thing that SLA research tells us, materials should take into account that learners differ. Okay, so students are different. The styles are different. Students are different. For example, I am holistic. Sometimes I am analytic. Mr. Situde may be analytic, or Ehsan may be holistic. Ms. Jalalizadeh may be holistic and analytic, or sometimes analytic, sometimes holistic. But for me, I am more holistic than analytic. Students should be provided with different opportunities, or there are some exercises. Some exercises or practices are based on analytic abilities. Some of the exercises are based on holistic, actually, style. Some of the students are field independent, some of them are field dependent. We have different styles, okay? So the materials should take into account the learner's difference. And I believe that the students are different. The students come from different societies, from different contexts. Some of them are emotionally ready. Some of them are not emotionally ready. Some of them are privileged. Some of them are underprivileged. So students are different. The materials should take into account, to be sensitive to students' individual differences. Materials should take into account the learner difference in affective attitudes. Again, I mentioned this one. I mentioned that. These two are the actually same. Here, students are different in their, and I'm sorry, this one. Okay, let me, okay. Learning style, this means in terms of cognition. This pencil is difficult to use. Okay, but after this one, we have individual distance in terms of their emotion because of students' previous experience, previous backgrounds. Students may be, in terms of their emotional state, different. So the teacher, the materials, and the teaching should take into account these differences. Each class of learners using the same materials will differ from each other in terms of long and short-term motivation and of feelings and attitude about the language. For example, the same material may be used differently by Iranian and also Japanese learners. Iranian students may think negatively about target language or culture, but Japanese learners may think positively about American culture and actually language. So these things should be considered. The other thing that research in SLA actually tells us is materials should permit a silent period at the beginning of the instruction. A silent period, it means that we need warm up. We should not immediately go to the content, the delivery of the materials. So we need a silent. For example, in Japan, I have heard that students they have a long period of silence time. It means that, for example, for 3 to 5 years they do not study anything, but they are prepared for life skills. So this means a silent period. Again, we should have the same thing. For example, when students come to class for English grammar, the teacher immediately goes to introduce some of grammatical rules, bombarding students for grammatical rules. So this is problematic. The other actually fact coming from SLA research is that material should maximize learning potential but encouraging intellectual, aesthetic, and emotional involvement. Okay, intellectual involvement, aesthetic involvement. Human being has many resources. All these resources should be used. For example, only students' thinking abilities should not be involved. It is essential to involve students cognitively or mentally, but if you want to have better learning, effective and influential learning and development, intellectual, aesthetic, emotional involvement of students. Right brain, left brain, help learners visualize, image, to have imagination, to have dreams. We are human beings. We have feeling, to love something. The other one is materials should not rely too much on controlled practice. Unfortunately, controlled practices are unauthentic, non-authentic. So communicative practices. Sometimes we try to have controlled practices to simplify it, to be purposeful. Not all controlled practices are simplified. Sometimes controlled practices are distorted. They are non-natural. Okay, pay attention to this, important. And I think this is the, yes, this was the last one. Material should provide opportunities for outcome feedback. Okay, so it should be possible for the teacher through the materials to provide learners with feedback, or the teachers do not provide feedback. Students should generate their own feedback from the materials. For example, if in the materials there are reading comprehension activities, there should be some exercises, some activities that the students, after involving that activity, they can see or they can receive feedback from others, from the material itself. Feedback to check their progress. Feedback means that the students should be given the opportunity to use the assessment of the teacher, the assessment of the material itself, or to use self-assessment. Or they should be given the opportunity to reflect on their progress and learning. Okay, thank you for listening. And this was the materials for the fourth session, and I tried to introduce some of the concepts and terminology used in materials development. And in the second part, which was the topic and the content of the fifth session, I revisited and reviewed 16 findings coming from SLA research. SLA research, second language acquisition research. So we need other findings from other areas, such as discourse analysis, conversation analysis, psychology, sociology, linguistics, general education research. Two, they should use those findings together to have informed and research-based materials development, because second language acquisition is important we revisited the 16th findings of SLA research. Thank you for your patience and for your listening.